But hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Conversations in Leadership, an alumni panel for emerging professionals. My name is Jacqueline Wright, and I'm the alumni manager here at Newcastle University Business School, stepping in for Rebecca while she's on maternity leave. We're delighted to be hosting our first webinar in 2026 and are delighted that you could join us. In this 1-hour session today, our panel of experienced alumni will explore what it means to be a leader and help you start developing those core skills today that will shape your future career. Topics we'll cover include why authenticity matters, strategies for effective communication and influence, tips for navigating challenges with confidence, and insights into industry change shaping the workplace. So during the discussion, please feel free to ask questions using the chat function at any time. I've got my colleague, James. You can't see him, but he's here. He's monitoring the Q&A box. And at the end of the session, we'll have time for the panel to address your questions. Just a few housekeeping rules, which I'm sure you're all sick of hearing by this point in time. We're all used to these Zoom calls, but just in case, if you could please ensure you're on mute when not speaking, and that would be lovely. And if you experience any technical difficulties at all during the session, just please send a message to myself or my colleague James on the call. And if we could also kindly ask for you to change your Zoom name so that they reflect your real names. It's really helpful for us to understand who's joining, from where, and what appeals to different sorts of graduates as well. So it's really helpful if we have your real names. So I think that just about covers it. So we hope you enjoy the next 60 minutes. And now over to meet our panel. But first, I'm just going to share my screen. Oh, my goodness, technical difficulties already. There we go. Excellent. So we're incredibly fortunate to be joined by alumni located across 3 different time zones, representing a range of different industries, specialties, experiences. So each of these leaders has enhanced their experience through their time at Newcastle University, just like you. So I'll first provide a really basic overview of our panel and then let them introduce ourselves. So first, we've got Samina Bashi, who's an MBA graduate and global executive coach and leadership consultant, currently living in Newcastle. We've also got Atul Chowdhury, a computer science graduate and chief commercial officer in the financial services industry, currently living in Dubai. And then we've got Cecilia Lee, a marketing and management graduate and director of group talent and employer branding of a luxury hospitality group, currently living in Hong Kong. So this is a basic overview. So I'd like to pass to our panel to introduce themselves a bit more properly. So Samina, could you go first?
Hi, everyone. Great to be here today. Thanks so much, Jacqueline, for that introduction. So as Jacqueline said, I'm Samina. A little bit about my background. I've spent more than 30 plus years. My background is in the field of HR. And actually, once I graduated, spent a number of years working in HR, and then later felt that I actually needed to go back to study. And that's when I did my master's at Newcastle University and did my MBA there. And really part of the reason for doing that was just to basically broaden my knowledge, business knowledge, and really understand all the other functions. So that's my kind of linkage back to Newcastle. And as Jacqueline said, I currently live in Newcastle and have the pleasure of doing that. So, I know many of you will have been here, so know where I'm coming from. In terms of my career, I've worked in a number of different industry sectors. A big chunk of my 30 years, 15 years of that was spent with General Electric, GE. So I was the HR director and did a number of global jobs, working in various GE businesses, including GE Oil and Gas, GE Capital, GE Healthcare, as well as GE Renewable Energy, etc. So, had teams and so do understand quite a lot of the different cultures. About 5 years ago, I decided to leave the corporate world and set up my own business. It's something I'd always wanted to do at some stage in life. And what I do now is something I'm most passionate about, which is actually, coaching executive leaders to excel. And so I work with leaders all around the world. And really, it's all about how can they achieve peak performance, not only for themselves, but for their team, their organization, and also how to have impact from a career standpoint. So that's a bit of a quick introduction. The other thing I should say is I'm still very much involved with the university. I do sit on the business school. I'm on the international board of the business school and also the chair of the MBA. So there you go. I'll pass on to Cecilia.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Cecilia. Actually, I grew up in Edinburgh and I went to Newcastle for marketing and management degree. So I actually started in the marketing field in Newcastle. And then I went back to Hong Kong to continue my work here. So now I'm actually based in Hong Kong. I fell into HR. In fact, I started as a recruitment consultant, and my first job in HR was with one of the biggest luxury retail company. So spent a couple of years there focusing in talent acquisition and employer branding. Then I felt corporate life wasn't as much as I thought it would be. So I went into startup for a couple of years, doing a generalist HR role, so including compensation benefits, learning and development, talent acquisition as well. I pretty much enjoy that. But again, after a couple of years, I missed the corporate life again. And the opportunity came up with my current role with Langham Hospitality Group, where I head up the corporate talent acquisition and employer branding for the group here. We're based in Hong Kong, but we look after global businesses. We have around 40 hotels across the globe. A couple of folks sits in London, New York, Australia, Greater China, and Hong Kong as well. So that's my primary focus right now. And look, we can't wait to dive into more later on. Thank you.
And finally, Atul Chowdhury. So originally from the UK, was brought up in Northampton. I chose Newcastle University for the reason that it was one of the furthest universities away from my home in Northampton, which meant that parents couldn't come and see me without giving me sufficient notice. I did a degree in computer science, graduated in 1999, which is a brilliant year to graduate as a computer science person, because the Y2K or year 2000 was happening. Everyone was worrying that the whole of the computer industry in the world would collapse. It didn't, but everyone that graduated that year got paid handsomely and got a job very easily. So I was lucky to do that. My career started off in management consultancy. I've worked in many different industries. So I started off with utilities and asset management, and then moved on to banking. I've lived in quite a few countries. I'm currently in Dubai, but after having done my degree, I moved over to Australia, and I was in Sydney for 10 years, working with some of the world's biggest banks on digital transformation and launching new products. I then moved back to the UK, set my own startup, the same as Cecilia. And we actually sold that. And then I went back into banking. I launched a digital bank in France called Ditto Bank, which was part of Travelex, which we IPO'd back in 2019. And then I was the chief commercial officer for another neobank called Monese in the UK. And then more recently, I was the chief commercial officer for a Saudi digital bank working out of Riyadh for the last 2 years. And it's the fastest growing bank that they've ever had in the region. And now I've left the world of traditional finance and have moved more into DeFi. And I'm working on a stablecoin project as a board member, as well as a partner in an agency.
Incredible. Thank you all so much. And I think, all of our attendees can definitely see the range of experience that you all have across different industries and your expertise as well. So thank you so much for giving those overviews. First, I think we could start with a deep dive into the idea of just leadership in general and authentic leadership. I think that's a phrase that we hear fairly regularly now. And what does it mean to be an authentic leader? And I just think it'd be really helpful to kind of dive into that. And Samina, do you want to start us off with maybe some of your
Sure.
insights?
Yeah, I mean, over the decades, leadership has changed, right? At one time, leadership was all about command and control. And if you were the leader, you were the one who knew everything, and you were the one who was just directing people as to what to do. But leadership in today's world is very different. I know we'll be talking about the trends in terms of future later, but now it's all about really being that authentic leader, someone who comes across as being genuine, someone who's consistent, and somebody who really actually, understands, they're not going to be the person that knows everything. Actually, the leader today is someone who should speak less and listen more. And that's the big shift is, how do leaders listen to others and lead with the heart and with a purpose and bring people with them? So really, it's all about being transparent and, and honest with people, but also being prepared to kind of, admit your mistakes when you make them. So the vulnerability factor. And realistically, often leaders are under huge pressure with the state of change, but people actually want to work for a leader that is consistent, that's predictable, that's not going to, come out with sort of bizarre behaviors during that level of pressure. And really, how do you get the best from others, right? So it's not about, status, it's about service. So it's that servant leadership where it's all about how do you bring out the best from others and really kind of adapting. So the big thing around being an authentic leader is really understanding yourself first before you try and understand others. So when I say understand yourself, many of you will already be in leadership roles, right? And but people need to understand that leadership is like a continuous journey, just like your technical skills that you keep trying to improve. Leadership is also something that you must keep trying to improve. I work with a lot of CEOs and executive leaders who've been leaders for 20 plus years, but they are still trying to excel in their leadership and they're still trying to get better and better. So I think that's the first thing I would say is it's all about that continuous improvement. The other big thing around, is how do you bring out the sort of the best in others? And I can talk a little bit more around, building high performing teams, but I won't get into that right now. I'd like to just come back to that and maybe let some of the others kind of add to what I'm saying. So hopefully, because we'll all have different experiences. I can give examples, and I know we're taking questions as well towards the end. So I'll come back to that. So I'll just pass on to anybody else who wants to jump in with further thoughts around being that authentic leader.
No, I totally agree with you, Samina. I think, in fact, we had a leadership award just 2 months ago. So our colleagues was voting who is the most authentic, trusted leaders. And you need to put in the reason why you vote for that leader. And one of the things that, not so surprised to me, is that one of our executive leader, what he did was every time he goes around and say hi to our team member, he addressed the name to every single one. So that really built that rapport with the team in the office, remembering names. And I think that's built on what Samina has mentioned about being authentic and genuine to the team member. And I often challenge him, what's the next level? Do you remember the spouse name, their pet's name, their children's name? Where are they from, right? So these are the little things that really makes you stand out as a leader. You're showing that you genuinely care to the team members around you. And I vote for that leader as well. Every time he walks past, it's hi, Cecilia, good morning, Cecilia. You really feel that genuine leadership from him. That's my take on that part.
I think from my side, so firstly, Cecilia, I'm really bad with names. So I would never have won that award. It's one of my, I think it's my kryptonite or my
It's a challenge for you
I'm
then.
really bad which is why living in Australia was great, because everyone is your mate. So it made it much easier. But I think one of the things that I've realized in terms of leadership as well is you have to understand your audience as a leader. Some people thrive in an environment where they are told exactly what to do. Some people don't like ambiguity. They don't like to be given the free rein. So for those people, you have to understand and actually help them to achieve their goals. On the other side, you have other people that need some autonomy, need the ability to be able to go and do something, and they don't like being micromanaged or asked consistently, and actually they don't perform to their best ability if you do that. So I think one other thing to add is you have to kind of know your audience. You have to relate to the organization. And actually, some of the best leaders in the world, and you look at the companies that are the most high performing leaders, need to make decisions as well. And I think that's a big thing that you find, especially when you're in an early stage organization. Having ambiguity, having people that don't make decisions really slows the organization down. So sometimes you almost have to have that kind of dictatorial view. You look at all of the big kind of American companies that have done really successfully. You generally find that their CEOs have been people that have made decisions, right or wrong, but more consistently. So I think that's the 2 points that I would make.
And I think just to keep building on what Atul's saying, yes, decision making is really key. But I think the point here is taking input from others versus just making decisions without the data and also the input from other folks, right? Some leaders can impact their team by not really taking their points of view into account. I think building on what Atul's saying is really important to understand the team. So that brings me back nicely into, how do you build that high performing team, right? I think the mistake a lot of people make is that they think that they should be, it's not about them. Actually, the way we used to judge strong leaders in a company like GE, which was known for its leaders and bringing on its leaders, is essentially, we would often take the leader's picture off the org chart and look at the team and say, what kind of team has this individual got? If they've got a really high performing team, for us, that's a really strong leader. And that means that leader is ready to be promoted to another role. So, a lot of people sometimes hold people back in their teams, or they are worried about, somebody being better than them from the team. Actually, it's all about how do you build capability in your team. So when you're talking about building high performing teams, the first thing to do is, bring in really strong talent. We were always told in GE that you bring in talent that not only can do the job that you're recruiting them for, but have the capability of doing future roles, maybe a couple of levels higher than what they were being recruited for, because it had huge potential. Because that's what you're trying to bring in, great talent to start with. And then it's all about how do you ensure, as Atul was saying, that you understand your team members. And again, what Celia was talking about, I get amazed by leaders when I ask them about their team. They don't actually know anything about their team members. And I don't just mean their names or, what jobs they do, but really about the individual, what motivates them, what drives them. And if you can't answer those questions about your team member, then I'm not really sure that you're going to get the best out of your team. People come to work for different reasons. It's not about money most of the time. It's for a lot of other factors, and it's understanding what's driving them so you can get the best out of them. And realistically, building a high-performing team is all to do with, and if you look at those American corporations and other corporations that Atul was talking about, these leaders are very, very good at being able to clarify the vision of where they want to go to, but also taking the input and then coming up with really clear strategies to drive that change. And they build a community. People feel they belong We've all worked for leaders that we've loved being part of their team because they just knew how to build that community and connection between everybody. They're not fighting one person against the other. They're actually trying to align them. So that's really what I would say is it's really important to bring in strong talent, but also make sure that you're being that servant leader where you're helping them develop and excel, because it's all about helping others, be promoted to taking on bigger roles. It's going to help your promotion in the long run.
It's almost like building your team as a successor for you in the long run.
Yeah. Exactly right. Exactly.
Yeah. And I think too, building on what actually all of you were saying, how important it is to actually know your team and to understand what are their drivers, what are their motivators, and understanding even something as simple as just their name. And that's something that everybody, even if you're just starting in a job, that's how you kind of build that trust as well, isn't it? Starting to get to know your colleagues, get to know the people around you and starting to understand them. So as you grow in the ranks, you're able to take that knowledge with you and people can see that you're a supportive, authentic person as you go through that. And I think building upon that idea of communication and really being able to, interact with your colleagues, that effective workplace communication is something we've all encountered, positively and negatively. And Cecilia, I was wondering if you could talk a bit about kind of how you can, improve your communication and influence within the workplace.
Definitely. Communication is definitely the heartbeat of any company. It's the same principle applies in the workplace, especially now we have the multi-generation reality where we have the Gen Z, Gen Y, boomers, and they all have different communication style. For example, Gen Z more digital natives. They want concise, more visual communication. So Slack threads, quick video, instant messaging, instead of say 10 email exchange. Whereas the boomers may value more in person or face-to-face interview meetings as well. So how to navigate through that? I think in order for you to be successful in the workplace, you need to understand different communication style, not just your manager, but the people you work around, your team members, your stakeholders, and try to adopt into it. And that will help you become successful. For example, what is your manager or your senior executive or your team members' communication style? Do they prefer meeting in person? Do they prefer you sending them a text or email? And when you can accommodate that, they will feel more comfortable working with you and trust can be built upon that. And I always tell them, hey, if you're unsure what their communication style is, you ask them, right? How do you prefer updates? Do you prefer in person, once or twice a week over an email? Would you like to see data graphs or storytellings? So if you're unsure, you do ask them what they prefer in terms of the communication style. So make sure that you're aware with the people that you're working with. And sometimes I also encourage some of the new joiners or our junior members and tell them what your communication style is, right? Maybe you prefer something that's different from them, but it's okay. You find a common ground between you two or between the team. So again, when they feel comfortable working with you, then you can build trust on that. And it's all about the effective communication. So I think it's important to learn about different communication styles between your team and your manager. And I always think that, to be able to be successful in the workplace, you need to make sure other people are successful, which brings back to Samina's point, is to be able to support each other as well. I'm just going to pause here quickly. Maybe some of our panelists would like to add up a bit more here.
Yeah, I would say that, I get amazed by how many leaders don't actually make time for their team members for those one-on-one conversations. And when they have those one-on-one conversations, it's always like bang, bang, bang. What's happening with this? What's happening with that? What's happening with the other? It's very task focused versus really using that communication to coach and develop and really understand what some of the concerns are with the individual, right? And the other thing I would say about communication is just as important as your communication with your team, I know Cecilia just touched on it, is these peers. The more senior you get, actually your communication with your team members should be pretty good by then. I mean, otherwise you're unlikely to get promoted in the first place. But then you're often working in a silo in your functional area, whether you happen to be in commercial or technology or finance or whatever. But actually, the most successful leaders are the ones who communicate effectively across their peer group. Really, it's, are you collaborating with your peers? Because in the end, you're much more likely to progress your career if you're seen as that team player who doesn't just sit in their silo and only think about their function, but actually understands the broader business and is able to communicate with their peers and influence them, because that is really how you're going to drive change in the organization. So, I don't know, Atul, do you want to add more to some of the things I'm saying on the communication side?
I think, Samina, definitely. I mean, creating influence is one of the greatest skills that you can have, and it's critical to becoming senior in any organization, whether it's a small organization or a big organization. I think what I've noticed, and I did a lot of management consulting, going into companies that were either not performing or had just gone through a digital transformation or an M&A or something. And one of the common threads that came out was the companies that the areas that weren't performing, or the issues that we were identifying, almost always led to communication. So it was never that the work was not getting done. It was always that no one knew the work was getting done.
That's true.
And so again, with those kind of problems, it's very easy to fix, right? You just start communicating better, not over communicating. There can be too much as well. But having, regular stand-ups, having small meetings, being able to confirm something in either in writing or verbally or something makes a huge difference. And I think nowadays, at least in this region, we've moved away from emails and documenting everything. It has to be more real time. Like, businesses these days can't afford to send an email, wait for a response. And so you start seeing loads of different channels emerging on how to do communication, everything. And it almost always reverts back to the most live of services. So usually WhatsApp or, Teams or something like that. So I think the way that, and businesses as they evolve, I think as we get further into AI and the new way of working, then actually you won't be doing a lot of the communication. Your synth or your assistant will be doing it. So it's even more important to make sure that what you're doing now is ready for the change that's coming.
I agree. When you touch upon tech, and especially in AI, if you can use your strength in navigating these tools, instant messaging, Slack, whatever it is, and coupled with good communication, so you're actually bridging that gap between different communication style or the multi-gen reality, that is the win-win. So that is your strength right there for some of our audience here, that you're good at tech, you're good with AI, good with all these tools, but how do you bring upon that in your workplace and help to bridge that gap between some of the team members that are not so good at this? So having that good communication skills, which I'm sure you will probably touch upon later, is definitely one of the most key, the important skills in the next many, many years to go. So I definitely
AI is making writing easier, and you're better. You're a better writer now with AI than you were before, but it's not making talking and communicating any easier yet. So it's still an important skill to have in the short term.
That's why it brings to a good point where the internal networking is as important as it is, because that will not replace that face-to-face, that stand-up, that rapport that you can build when you're there with your colleagues. Basically, who knows you in the company, you would then get the chance to get the next project, gets the next promotion. So what I always share with some of our new joiners or the junior members If there is something that you want to do, then start a group, a sports group, a hobby that some of you like, do it together and build upon that. So I think that's, obviously very, very important. Like Samina before, you mentioned who showed up in those meetings, who actually turn on their camera throughout the Teams meeting instead of having their camera shut off, or who's actually there when all these team events happen. So these are you will be able to be seen with your peers, and you get much more opportunity with that, with the internal network. So I think definitely is very important.
Cecilia, and again, building on those internal and external networks, when I think about nearly every job I moved to, it wasn't necessarily a job that I applied for. It was my internal network that reached out to me to say, hey, we've got this other role, which we think, you would really love. And if I hadn't put my hands up for certain projects, I wouldn't have been exposed to this broad network. And that's how the opportunities came. So it's all about who you know. Those are where your opportunities are going to come from. And a lot of leaders say to me, like, Samina, especially introverts who don't enjoy the networking piece, right? They'll say they feel uncomfortable with it, etc. But it's something that you have to get comfortable with, and and it's easily trainable. And also, how do you make time in your calendar to build those networks? Because people say, I don't have time to do all that stuff. But actually, it's part and parcel of your job, and actually makes you effective in your work, often because people give you ideas about how you can implement within the workplace. And external networks where you can benchmark what other organizations are doing, so you can actually bring in new ideas and new thought processes. So these internal and external networks are so critical as part of that communication piece that we have to make time for them if you want to be a really strong leader.
Yeah, and just to ask as well, because networking is something we talk to our graduates about, when they're students and then when they graduate. And obviously, Newcastle is a network in and of itself. Being a graduate, that's the one thing we all have in common. But at the same time, it can be really intimidating. Approaching people or maybe doing some self-promotion. So I don't know if any of you have any thoughts about how do you, because obviously people don't know you're doing well unless you tell them or unless you show them. So how do you go about kind of doing that self-promotion without it feeling, I don't know, a bit uncomfortable or a bit cringe that, you're going out and doing that?
I mean, I can quickly jump in and I'll let Atul speak as well, because people always say to me, how do you best way to network is actually ask people about what they're doing. People love talking about what they're doing. And a great way of then bringing in what you're doing is part of that conversation, right? So, setting up a meeting to say, I'd love to know more about X, Y, and Z that you're working on. People will make the time, number one. Then they're going to tell you about the stuff that they're doing. You're going to weave in all the stuff that you're doing. And actually, you start there in immediate collaboration, often, which didn't exist. So, if you're worried about, well, what's the reason I'm putting out there to kind of network with you? Well, it's usually about either something that they're involved in or something that you would like about them or something you want to learn from them. Great way of networking. And also trying to find ways to help them, to give them solutions to some of their problems, which makes networking so easy and not about self-promotion, but is self-promotion in its own way. I don't know, Atul, if you want to add any more to that, but that's kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah, no, I think for me, especially with your colleagues, sometimes work can become very transactional. And if you're in the office and you're constantly just meeting people, in meeting rooms, and this was really bad during COVID, actually, when you're just on a Zoom call, you don't get to interact and have, build a rapport or a relationship with your colleagues, let alone your partners or your clients or anyone like that. So take the time, take the effort to go and do some, outside of work networking with your colleagues. What you learn even from your boss when you're having a coffee or a drink or whatever is probably way more valuable than what you'll learn in the office. And even when I was sort of jumping at the start of my career, building a rapport with people that are senior in the organization, going to the events, spending time to talk to them, often leads to your next big role, because they'll remember you and you'll stand out from all of your peers that potentially haven't had any interaction with that person.
Exactly, I agree. If I can just build upon what Samina mentioned about external networking, one thing that I did was, it, like you said, it could be a bit like selling yourself, but another way to create that external network is when you ask for help. When you ask for help, people come and try to help you with the solution. So what I did when I transit from a consultant role and an intern in an in-house HR role, because it's a completely different position. I've never been in HR before. So I raised my hand in the group chat. I said, I need help. What is an HR? I've never done that. So then I created actually a community that has a similar background as me, who has also been a consultant and then went into in-house HR, because they all need help. They also want a solution and want to gather and learn from each other. So I think another way could be when you actually, don't be afraid and ask for help. And I'm not familiar with this, what's your input in there? And people will oftentimes be willing to help you out. And if you are on the same boat, that's even better, because then you will create that strong bonding. So that's what I did to create an external networking and community, and it's going strong, and you can exchange information as well. So I think that could be one of the things that you could also start doing and creating your external networks too.
Yeah, and going off of that as well, I guess that kind of leads back or goes back to authentic leadership, doesn't it? Because it's that idea of vulnerability, asking for help, but also trust. Because when, if you're reaching out to people or, they're coming to you, you're building that trust as well. So I guess that touches upon, in being vulnerable, you're also letting people know that that's the type of leader you'll be as well. Someone who's not afraid to ask for help and can also offer support as well. But of course, help, you need help when you're facing challenges. And often in the workplace, especially as you mentioned, when you are transitioning roles, that's a huge challenge. And that's something that's really hard. And all of you have moved countries, you've moved jobs, and the challenges that we never foresee coming inevitably happen. So I guess, Atul, would you mind maybe potentially talking about how do you adapt to challenge as a leader, especially? What sort of things do you keep in mind when challenges are thrown your way?
So having worked in many countries, one of the things that you very quickly realize is that people are the same and people are also very different at the same time. So the things that you learn in one company, in one industry, with one set of people will not necessarily repeat, even if it's the same industry and a similar size company. It's very, very different. So you have to, I think, in every role, take some time to calibrate with the environment around you, whether it's the people, the processes, the technology, the country, and everything. Because if you don't, and you're very stubborn, and you think what you've done in the past is the way that you will, is always going to be the path of the future, it generally doesn't work out. And as someone that's been hiring a lot, one of the, an instance where we saw that was, and you see this quite often with actually PhD graduates who have spent so long in their life concentrating on, on a very small subject, that actually the whole world somehow gets related back to this subject that they've been studying, whether it's relevant or not relevant. And I think what we found is this can be quite frustrating for people around them for a while. But, and I have mentored a couple of people and said to them, look, think beyond, you're not allowed to mention your PhD. Think beyond your PhD and go through and tell me about the topic that you're trying to talk about. Put it to real life examples. Tell me how it relates to your family. Tell me how it relates to this. And suddenly, when they broke out of that, they became a completely different person. So I think that's one particular example. And then don't be scared of change. I've worked. Cecilia was telling us as well. You need to go from big organization to startup to big organization. And in fact, one of the best ways to get promoted is not to stay in the same organization for many years. It used to be the path. You would normally, leaving a job in less than 4 years, you were considered, you weren't loyal, you weren't really thinking about the company, you'd lose all of this knowledge that you've got. But now the people that I see that are the most successful are the ones that actually have gone into an organization, spent 2 or 3 years, learned, especially in the early stages of their career, and then moved industry, moved position, moved from a small company to a big company, or vice versa. Because you end up being your experience becomes a lot broader that way. And people should also not be scared of, we've got a lot of MBA grads here. Don't be scared of setting up your own business. It feels hard, it feels expensive, but and you will get, every successful founder has probably had 3 failures, so you will face failures. But I think the biggest learning that I ever had, the exponential learning, came from when I set my own business up, because I was learning things that I never even knew existed. I was learning everything from finance to HR because you have to do everything. And I think that accelerated my knowledge massively.
I mean, I would add to that, because again, I came out of big corporates to setting up my own business, knew nothing about setting up my own business. And it's amazing the learning that takes place. And again, goes back to Celia's point that she was making, is that, you've got to change. We are in a world of change. There are leaders that I speak to at pretty senior levels who'll say to me, Samina, I just hate change. And I think, wow, like how in this day and age can you hate change? It's got to be one of those natural things that you have to be able to get very comfortable with. That level of ambiguity. I spend a lot of time with leaders helping them cope with ambiguity, because the leaders who actually make a success of things are those who don't have all the information and can go with connecting the key dots and being able to make the bold decisions that Atul was talking about without all the picture ahead of them, right? So change is going to be inevitable. Get really comfortable with it. If there's something that freaks you out about change, analyze what it is and find ways. And asking for help while you're going through change is a very quick way of adapting to that change. So I think it's one of those skill sets that you absolutely have to master, because transformation and change are not going away. If anything, they're accelerating. So the quicker and better you can deal with that sort of environment, the more impactful you're going to be.
I agree. And it's even the best time to talk about it. We have to go back to the technology, and with the AI, all these tools. If we are not adapting to change, you've already fallen behind, basically. A couple of us had a AI workshop 2 weeks ago, and we thought we are already on top of that. We're doing all this Copilot, we're already on POE, we're mastering these skills. After that training, we were, wow, oh dear, it's already another level. It's already, I don't know, whatever the new sets of tools there are already. But we thought we were already on top of things, but not exactly. So that's why now only change is constant. That's all I can say. So we need to ride on that wave for sure.
Absolutely. And I'm curious as well, because as you're in quite a senior role and, realizing like, oh goodness, I don't know any of this. And I know at some point everybody kind of experiences that. And I don't think in this situation is potentially imposter syndrome, but, people do experience that sort of like, oh gosh, am I supposed to be here? I don't know any of this. Have you dealt with that? Any of you, like in your careers, that imposter syndrome, and especially with our graduates as they're kind of starting to, their journeys, climbing the ranks and feeling exposed almost? How do you necessarily deal with that sort of feeling?
So I can jump in there. People think this is something that occurs at early stages in your career, right? But it's amazing how many people at the most senior levels, I've had CTOs, CFOs, who basically realize quite late in their career that they do suffer from imposter syndrome. And it is something that it's better to be self-aware and realize and look at, and at some point people will, some people suffer from it more than others. You will at some point in your career go through that. But overall, this is something that isn't just happening to people at lower levels in leadership. This is something people encounter at the most senior levels. These are high performing leaders already doing incredibly well, but just not thinking they are good enough, or they're thinking they're a fraud and they're going to get uncovered. And, something's going to, people are going to say, I'm not that good. And actually, how do you deal with those inner feelings, and how do you combat that? So I do spend time coaching. That's not my special area, but it's something that most leaders would encounter. So become self-aware. There's a lot of stuff written out there about imposter syndrome now. There are many strategies you can use, and actually, don't beat yourself up about it, because I've seen people have burnout with imposter syndrome, because they've worked so hard to try and prove themselves when actually they were doing amazing to start with. So, it's a real mind, something within the mind that has to, that you have to work on. But it's a lot of people suffer from imposter syndrome. Not unusual.
Great. And I am conscious of time. So before we move into questions, just curious if we could touch upon the future of leadership. I know we've mentioned AI quite a bit. How is the future shaping up for our leaders? How can the people in this call and our graduates, how can they start preparing themselves to be, I don't want to say future proof, but at least prepare themselves for what the future, has to bring?
Atul, we'll let you go first.
Generous.
So I had an interview the other day with a candidate, and one of the questions that I asked him was, did he use AI to generate his CV? Because it was, very well written, and he actually started to pretend that he had written it himself, or didn't admit to the fact that he used AI. And for me, that was a massive negative, because I think if you're not using AI to generate your CV, you're wasting time. Like, why would he have spent 4 hours trying to do a CV? He could have spent 30 minutes getting the prompts right and getting the CV that he needed. So, and this is a common thread that we're seeing, certainly in the industries that I'm working in, where people have to adapt and know that AI is here. It's there to help. If someone now sits in my office writing a document and doesn't use AI, that's a problem for me. Now, they're wasting time. Don't hide from it. Don't pretend that you can write better. There's no reason to. So I think there's a big shift that certainly in the modern industries that we're seeing, that AI is helping. And I think AI is it's the worst it's ever going to be right now. And it is going to start taking a lot more, I wouldn't say jobs, but it is going to make things much easier for a lot of people. We see a realignment in the type of roles that we're hiring for now. We don't see AI replacing people necessarily. We see productivity going up for people who know how to use AI effectively. And we're now encouraging people to do that. So don't hide. Even, our meetings, our screen shares are with, on Claude or on Gemini. So you're actually using the AI in real time while brainstorming with it, rather than pretending that you're not using it and doing it in the background. So I think that's a big shift.
And that's exactly right. It's really, how do leaders, help really drive that change with AI and help employees embrace that? And not only embrace, because there are people who have fear of it, right? And it's, how do you actually ensure this great collaboration between AI and humans, and actually create that environment where people are comfortable with it? And so realistically, there's going to be a lot of work around how do you get the best out of people? Are you utilizing folks in the best way? Because are they wasting a lot of time doing stuff that, that can be done by robots, etc. And really, the role of the leader is going to be about how do you help bring the two together in an impactful way that drives the change in your organization. So if leaders aren't digitally savvy, then they need to be digital. That's really is a requirement. So definitely don't hide away from it if you don't know enough. The other big thing I would say is the continuous learning. You have to keep learning, every day. As Cecilia said, you think you know something, and actually there's a ton more to learn. So get into that mindset of learning, right? I think that is absolutely critical moving forward as a leader. And as I said right at the beginning, that leadership is that continuous journey. So that's the trends, the way things are going. It's a bit like a few years ago, everybody's talking about, remote working, and I can't work with people unless they're in the office every day. Well, gosh, get over it. Figure out how to make, do that effectively. And the leaders who can do that with no matter where somebody's sitting are actually incredibly impactful. So it's going to be similar on the AI front, right? So I'll just pass over to Cecilia.
No, I agree on the continuous learning part. And apart from the AI, the tech skills, is to stack your other skills. Like I said, back in the days, if you're, say, a dentist or a doctor, you're set for life. But now it's what are the other skills that makes you stand out in the crowd, right? So I always talk about that T-shaped skills. The one on the horizontal being your core skill, what is what you specialize in, and the one in the vertical are the other skills that makes you stand out. For example, my core skill is HR. I've been in this industry for a long time. But on the vertical skill, I'm also a nutritionist. I do wellness courses. I'm a wellness consultant as well. And in fact, this is exactly the reason why I got my current job. Because when I was interviewing, the company is heavily emphasizing on wellness approach to our employees. They want somebody who is also being empathetic and know a little bit about wellness. So it's a combination of the both skills that I have able to got my job here. So I would definitely encourage you lot to continuous learning, stack up your skills, whether be it AI, technology, or something that you enjoy doing and makes you stand out, make you unique in the market and in the workplace.
That's brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing those insights just about kind of what's to come. I'm sure if we had this session a year from now, it'd probably be a lot of the same, but also incredibly different at the same time. So I'm conscious, again, we've had such a rich discussion, but we do have a question in the chat. And so we've got, what behaviors should graduates practice now to become future-ready leaders? And what organizational support genuinely accelerates that development? Is there anyone who'd like to take?
There used to be a saying that said, Jack of all trades, master of none. And I think what I've seen in business and what I'm seeing in business is actually that used to be a negative thing. It's now a positive thing. If you are a jack of all trades, you understand a bit about a lot of different roles within an organization. You understand a bit about finance. You understand a bit about HR. You understand a bit about sales and marketing development. That's honestly the type of leaders that people are looking for at the moment. So I think from my experience, even though you've done, I'm sure that I haven't done a business degree at Newcastle, but I'm sure that it gives you that broad experience of different facets of the company. And it goes all the way back to our first question, where if you understand a bit about the other functions, you can have a much more mature conversation with your peers as well. So I think that would be my one thing to do.
And it was the same reason that I did go back and do the MBA, and that's what is getting that breadth, right? It's getting that breadth of knowledge and expertise. But I think also, ensure that you are getting organizational support. I mean, a lot of the work I'm doing now is actually it's the organization that's paying for a lot of the executive coaching of leaders to excel, and they're picking their best leaders. At one time, people used to think the person who needs coaching is someone who actually is not performing. Do you know what I mean? So in reality, the point here is they're only investing in their top performers because they want them to excel as fast as possible. So if there is opportunities like that, consider that, and just keep trying to make sure that you are building your skill set, and don't be uncomfortable going into a completely new area if you see that your career is going to be so automated with the way things are moving that you will consider retraining or rethinking your career. Be comfortable adapting to that change. And, even doctors I know are having to adapt because some of their skills are being picked up and taken. So really, it's about being comfortable to, reposition yourself and rebrand yourself, a bit like what Cecilia was talking about earlier.
No, I agree. What Samina said, back in the days, the leadership programs are more tailored to the senior executive, those who have been in the company for 20, 30 years. But the change, what I'm seeing now is that we are also investing in the early leaders as well, who's been with us 3 years, 5 years. But again, when the opportunity is here, you need to grasp it, right? So be there, be seen, go out there, meet your colleagues, be there when meetings happen, mingles with your colleagues. Then when the opportunity is here, you need to grasp it and get that opportunity for the company to help you to grow into that leadership role that you desire.
Fantastic. What a great note to end on. So before we officially wrap up our panel, just one final question. So if we could just go down the row, and each of you, if you had one piece of advice that today a graduate could go out and start developing their leadership skills, what's one thing they can do today?
I would say there's a ton of information out there on how to be a great leader. There's some great authors, there's fantastic podcasts. Don't just think that it'll just come to you, okay? Because often it doesn't. And there's some fantastic ideas on how you can accelerate your leadership. So get out and listen to stuff. Even if you haven't got time, do it while you're doing something else, but keep that learning, going back to that theme. So because leadership is a skill set and you have to pick up all those techniques. So that's what I'd say. Read, listen, and also get great role models, mentors that you can actually learn from. That's going to accelerate your leadership.
Maybe, yeah. I'll just quickly, it's a simple point. I think when you have been a graduate, you come out with a lot of theoretical learning and very little real world experience. So the quicker you can get that real world experience, because life's very different from a textbook. And again, to Samina's point, find the right mentors, find the opportunities, go and work. If you have to work for free, go and work for free just to get that experience, because what you'll learn is much better than anything that you can be taught.
I was going to say upon the same exact thing. When I started working, I was lucky enough to have a good leader that I could look up to, I admired, I learned from her, and find that person. You might not find it now, but keep an eye open. You will find that, and you can learn a lot from them. And you can also learn a lot from leaders that are not great as well. You observe them, some of the skills that you don't want to pick up in your own leadership style. I think that could be a good way to actually learn quicker too.
Absolutely. Oh, perfect. Well, thank you again. You all have been an absolutely brilliant panel. We're so appreciative to have our graduates come back to support other graduates. And it just goes to show how powerful this Newcastle University community really is. So before we go, I'm just going to struggle to share my screen one more time, but essentially just want to be able to highlight just a few things that we have going. Oh, goodness me. There we go. A few things going on. So if you are a graduate within 3 years of the business school or the wider university as well, you still have access to our career support and startup support, like a few of our panelists mentioned, starting your own business. We have a lot of opportunities to be able to help you and support you on that journey. Also, the Newcastle University alumni group, we are everywhere. We are all over the world. And we also have loads of different online sessions as well. So there are 2 different QR codes there. So please, I'll send these out afterwards as well so you have access. But it's the idea that just because you graduated doesn't mean that you've really left Newcastle. We are constantly, putting on different events, trying to help support our community. And hopefully one day, in a few years' time, you'll be sitting on a panel just like this, offering insights to the next generation of graduates. So we really appreciate you taking the time to join us, listen in. I'm sorry we didn't get to all your questions. I actually had quite a few, but I might put them to the panel and see if we can get some written ones, because honestly, we could have gone on for another hour or so. It was such an enriching conversation. So thank you again, and stay tuned. And if there's anything we can do to support you personally, professionally, please don't hesitate to get in touch. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Great to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you.